demand course, which consists of about 110 videos, right, Sheikh Bilal?
It's about 117.
117, yeah. And it's got 5 modules. He calls it the 5 C's for a happier, healthier, and thriving relationships, right? Or
doing
marriage.
very well, mashallah. Very good memory.
I've done my studies. But I've personally subscribed myself and am benefiting from it, alhamdulillah. But tonight we're just going to hone into one module, that is communication. So the 5 C's, they all represent things like connection, communication, compromise. So there's 5 C's. Inshallah, tonight we're going to speak about this. But before we do, Sheikh Bilal, let me ask you maybe a hard question. What makes you the marriage expert, inshallah?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. First of all, I'm very grateful that you're hosting me. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this, inshallah, this gathering a gathering that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, and that it's a very beneficial gathering for all those who are present physically and online. So to the question, I've been in the marriage space for some 23 years as a marriage celebrant, as a marriage counselor, as a divorce facilitator, and as a matchmaker. So you get to see people from all walks of life. I do this in person, in my office. I do this online. And the more you're interacting with couples, with spouses, with marital issues, subhanAllah, you pick up patterns, you pick up human behavior. At the same time, I have a very vested interest in studying relationships, marriage particularly, and any book, any course that I could have got my hands on in the past, I did, whether it's from an Islamic perspective or from a modern day research academic perspective, from the Gottman Institute to the Pease. I don't know if you've heard of the Pease couple, to Dr. John Gray from Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, to the 5 love languages, the Gary Chapman. So we know when you look at all of this work, you see the same information being said over and over again, and then you see it on the grounds. And so you keep on, when all you do is talk marriage day in, day out, you sort of get good at it.
You get expertise. Yeah, very good.
And so people have human behavior, like, and it doesn't matter whether you're from Sydney or I'm counseling somebody from from the US or from the UK or from Tasmania. SubhanAllah, it's the same challenges, it's the same recurring issues,
especially perhaps in the West, that includes Europe, US, Canada, Australia. I do feel that we're going through similar challenges and similar experiences. So what's your story, Sheikh Bilal? You said you're very vested in this area. How did you get into this area? You were a Islamic school teacher, right?
Teacher, yeah. I was a school teacher, and I've been in the space of giving dawah ever since my teenage years.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that, I remember teaching Arabic and Quran, and when you're in this space, people want to automatically gravitate to you and come to you and ask you questions about marriage, even though I wasn't really qualified to answer questions about marriage. But people will still come to you, you want to help, and they don't really have anywhere else to go. And so you go, oh my God, people are coming to me, especially if you've done their marriage, and they want to come back to you, they're familiar with you. You may have said a few good things, and people assume that you're going to know it all, right?
Yeah.
And then before I knew it, I thought, hold on, I better get resourceful. I better start reading more about this. And I found that I can help people by learning in the same way. If you've got a passion for, say, psychology or medicine or whatever it is, you then go and learn more because you want to help people. And that's what I wanted to do. I quickly saw that that the breakdown of marriages was contributing to a lot of toxicity, a lot of stress, iman issues, parenting issues. And I thought, you know what, I want to be a part of the solution. I want to be a part of that solution. And so I invested my money, invested my time, and went to the best of the best to learn about how to help people turn things around.
Alhamdulillah. Great to have people like you in the community.
Jazakallahu khairan, barakallahu feek.
So let's maybe come to our topic for tonight, and that is to know yourself and your partner and yourself. So why is that important? Like, why is knowing your partner important for a marriage? Especially, I guess, for the people who are singles at this stage and they're looking for a spouse.
It's very important to know your partner, because your partner, you're going to have obviously certain expectations. I think that's a word that we want to sort of highlight right now, expectations. You've got expectations. You've got needs, you've got values, you've got a belief system, and you want to make sure that your partner marries up to a large extent with, with your outlook, with your vision. And if they're not on the same page, what do you think is going to happen? There's going to be a lot of clash, because it goes again that they're going to be doing things or saying things or believing things that go against your own beliefs. So it is important to know what you want, so you don't end up getting what you don't want. It's important to know, what is your vision, So I think why do we need to know that? To really mitigate disappointment, because that disappointment is going to lead to frustration. That frustration could lead to anger. And so you really need to know what you're getting yourself into. You need to know what you want, and you need to know whether your partner is on the same page. Now, when I look at a list of all the reasons for divorce, right? When we look at the list, I could probably put a heading on that list, which is the list failed expectations, that I expected not to be abused, that I expected you to be quite committed to me and only me. I expected, when it comes to the finances, that you are the one that's going to show up, for example, as a husband. I expected, we can go on with everything. Yeah. So now we have failed expectations. And when we have failed expectations, we're going to feel resentment, then the resentment to disappointment, to anger, and so on and so forth. So it's very important to know what you want, and to know if this person is going to share your values and your vision and your expectations.
Yeah. And how much of that, I guess this may be a bit hard to answer, but how much of that do you see being communicated before marriage to the other side?
There's a lot that's being communicated, but are you communicating the real stuff, the stuff that beyond the honeymoon, beyond the novelty, beyond the attraction? Are you really thinking about this long term? Because the honeymoon stage, or what they call the limerence stage, or that attraction or that infatuation stage, has got really has got somewhat of an expiry date when before true love kicks in.
How long is that?
The research suggests about up to 2 years.
Okay. Right.
So you're really infatuated, and then reality kicks in, children kicks in, stresses, money issues, in-laws issues, neighbor issues, right? There's a lot of stress going on, right?
Yeah.
So I think the communication before the marriage needs to be about what is most important to you, and that's going to ensure that this is a healthy and a thriving marriage.
Yeah, we'll come into that a bit later, inshallah. Like Sheikh Bilal has about 12 pages of questions just under this topic. I was scrolling through it, so there's a lot that you can.
Yes, if you go to my website, there's 250 premarital questionnaires, a questionnaire of over 250 questions, and it covers the different areas of life.
Yep.
And that's where you can ask questions that you probably never even thought about. And it could be sometimes just one question that the person answers in a way that becomes the deal breaker of this relationship. And I've seen that people have actually reached out to me and say, hey, I've got this question, and is it really a deal breaker? You know, and I say it's really up to you.
Yeah.
It's up to your expectation and how important this area is to you. So I think the premarital work is very important to find out that you've married the right person. And many of us just are very wishful thinking and not thinking long term. And the quality of your marriage is going to impact your mental health, your physical health, your resilience to feel better, your parenting, your salah, the quality of the cooking, the quality of the driving. You want to make sure you get this right.
That's right. And there's research that shows that a good marriage actually extends your life, right? So
yeah, I mean the quality of, yeah, of course, if you're going to be plagued with chronic stress from the relationship, ongoing stresses, and always, having you're always in this fight or flight, state, that's not going to be healthy.
That's right. Yeah. So what about the people who are already in the marriage, in the relationship? So yes, we need to do our homework. We need to make sure that we have all these questions lined up and discuss this with our potential spouses. But what about people in the relationship already? How important is it for them? Like, is there still more to know about your spouse, or do you just do it at the start and it's all done? How do you see it?
I believe that marriage is always a work in progress. It's always a work in progress. You never really stop knowing your spouse. I mean, just the other day, after so many years of marriage, my wife learned about me how when I was 10 years old, I used to do Taekwondo lessons. And she goes, you never told me that. All right. I go, you never asked. or we were never in a situation whereby we had to communicate that. We're always learning things about each other. And sometimes certain scenarios are going to bring out behaviors that there was never a time in the marriage whereby there was an opportunity to learn about that particular behavior. Now, so I think one of the things that I always say is after marriage, be prepared to continue to learn about the contributors that make a thriving marriage. Continue to unlearn and to relearn, because also we may have learned the wrong way of doing marriage through our parents, through our false expectations, right? So we need to really know how to do marriage right. And even myself, I'm always trying, to do new things and to learn even more on how to better that connection. Because what you want with your spouse is that emotional connection. Okay, for as long as the emotional connection is there and you're tethering, right? For as long as you're tethering, then the physical connection and the fun times are going to become organic. But without that emotional connection, the relationship is really going to be impacted. And so you want to know, how do we remain emotionally connected?
Can we perhaps expand on this concept a bit? So I guess, what does emotional connection look like, and what is it that really feeds it in a marriage?
I think that's something that we are going to address next week when we talk about love languages.
That's right, yeah.
But sure,
that's right.
It's about communicating in your partners, for example, love language. What do they like the most?
Yeah.
What do they, so doing more of what they love, but at the same time, moving away and not doing the things that irritate them. So being aware of their likes, their dislikes, what they love, what they don't love, being aware of their insecurities, maybe their trauma, what triggers them. So you're always very intentional. It's like you walk around with a cheat sheet of all the things that your partner loves, right? And that's what we'll talk about, the love languages. You know about their needs. What are their primary needs? Do they need more certainty? Are they more about love and connection? Are they more about variety? And are they more about any of those? Are they more about growth? Do you allow your partner to grow, or do you inhibit their growth? Are they more about, is your partner more about contribution and them contributing to the world, to the community? Do you allow them to do that? So it's all about being very intentional about what they wanted, what they like, and what they don't like. And then that way they feel, your partner feels that, oh my God, my partner has my back. They allow me to achieve my needs. They talk my love language. They respect my values. They respect my boundaries, my insecurities. These are all the words that are popping up in the counseling sessions, right?
Yeah. Before we go into the specifics, Sheikh Bilal, I guess, we try to get to know each other, but what is it that would encourage the other person, let's say, what can you perhaps show to the other person that would allow him or her to get to know more about you? Because I feel that sometimes we fall into this expectation from the other side where, this person should know this about me. This person should know that about me. I've implied something or I've said something, right? So, I'm married for 8 years now, so I go through these things myself. But how can we overcome this problem of really getting to know one another? Like, what would you advise in that regard?
Be very specific with your expectations and what you want. Be very specific. What do you want? No assumptions. No, you should know me by now. I disagree with that discourse because I think you should really spill it out and know what you want. Maybe you write it down and then communicate that to the other person in no uncertain terms, and maybe reiterate that to your partner. So again, going back to this concept of communication and communication of your expectations, needs, love languages, values. That way they now know in no uncertain terms, and then it's up to your partner to be intentional about meeting those expectations. So again, just very clear communication. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. So I guess being open, being specific, being very clear.
Yes,
these are very important.
Very, very important.
Which when we do, I think a lot of the problems can be overcome, and you can understand each other's needs and what they want. So it becomes a bit easier, perhaps. But so just going from that, you also have knowing yourself, right? So yes, knowing your partner, but knowing yourself. How important is that? And how do you know yourself? Like, how does one, really understand who they are or what they expect from a marriage? So yeah, just your thoughts on that, perhaps.
When it comes to knowing, your triggers. What is it that gets you upset? What is it that gets you angry? What behaviors? So make a list of those things so you can communicate those things. Hey, look, I've got a short fuse when it comes to this topic, or I've got a very low tolerance threshold. A lot of us to do is how much can you tolerate? How much can you tolerate? Because that's what it's going to come down to a lot with relationships is I may be able to tolerate what you're not able to tolerate, or vice versa. So the word tolerance is a very important word, I believe, because we don't all tolerate the same, or subhanallah, and we've seen this over and over again in the counseling sessions, and you think, wow, this person can really tolerate that. And you think that's amazing. And I would be thinking, I can never tolerate that, for example. So knowing what you can tolerate, knowing what your needs are, again, knowing how you want to be loved. So that way now you can communicate that. Because if you don't know, how is your partner going to know?
That's right.
If you don't know what you want, and you don't know what you can tolerate, how on earth are you going to communicate to your partner? How are they going to work it out?
Tough.
Very tough.
Yeah, that's right.
So I guess look at your past behaviors. what have maybe your family said about you? You're quite sensitive in this area. You're quite hasty in this area. So I guess you need to identify from what you've identified about yourself or what other people have identified about you.
So we need to do some homework ourselves, perhaps, before we start thinking about the other side. So coming to your 12 pages of questions, Sheikh, you've kind of put them into different areas, right? Like be it general, friends, family, religion. There's all these different areas that you've covered. And there's probably 250 questions. I didn't count them, but there's a lot of questions. I was hoping that we could go through a few of them, perhaps, and we'll go to, I guess, the floor as well later tonight. But we talked about expectations, for example, under the general questions that one could ask. If I was to ask you, like, what are maybe the top 2 questions that one should ask when it comes to that area, from your experiences, like what would those be?
The top 2 questions that we would ask a potential spouse.
Yeah, that's right.
I guess, I mean, for me, again, personally, I think the question around religion is very important because that's our identity, and that's going to probably most likely impact the future generation. So I think something around their commitment to Allah and the Deen is a very important question, because the quality of the relationship is going to be, really dependent on the quality of the relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal. The stronger the relationship, the connection with Allah, the stronger the chances of being connected to each other. And that's something that I see a lot, that those couples that, like, for example, came in that weren't committed to Allah Azza wa Jal, and then we reminded them to pray on time, we reminded them to do their morning and evening adhkar, we reminded them to keep away from the haram. When they did do all of these things for the sake of Allah, they found organically they were just gravitating to each other, and the relationship was now flowing, right? So we do see a connection, and we know that the pious people of the past, they would say that when they were married, they'd say we would disobey Allah with something during the day, and then when we came home, we found that our spouse was either giving us a hard time or our transport was being stubborn. Back then it was like, the camel or the horse, and they would blame themselves. They would blame themselves for the outcome of what was going on at home. And now, interestingly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ وَيَعْفُو عَنْ كَثِيرٍ, that whatever of misfortune befalls you is due to what your own hands have earned. Now, deen is very, very important as a question, because what's going to happen in most cases, and a lot of the times, people are going to reconnect with Allah. So if one of you reconnects, and let's say the other person is not connected, I've seen couples, that's exactly what happens. They were not on the same page. They came in and they were just all into each other on a very superficial level. Then they go back to their deen, or one of them goes back to the deen, one of them doesn't. There's this rift, there's this distance, and then they can't continue the relationship, and there's children involved. So you want to make sure that the deen aspect is very important. Probably another question, apart from these 2 questions, you need to identify what your deal breakers are. You need to identify what is it that's you will never ever tolerate, right? Let's say, for example, and it becomes a bit more personal, like those 2 questions become more on a personal level. But for me, the number 1 would be the deen. Okay. But then anything apart from that, it's about communicating what you will never tolerate.
Could you tell us maybe some examples from your experience, Sheikh? Like, what are some of those things that you see working in the field?
Yep. So, for example, in the area of polygyny. Yep. So again, some sisters or many sisters would never tolerate being a co-wife, right? That needs to be communicated, because the brother might think that, well, it's my God-given right to be married to more than one. that inshallah in the future he might have it in his head that it's okay, right? Or it might be around travel. For example, the person wants to stay in this country, but the other person wants to travel abroad in the future and go to a Muslim land or a Muslim country or region that's populated by Muslims. It could be around in-laws, and that I want you to live with my parents for forever, for example.
So, sorry, Sheikh, is the problem here that these weren't communicated to the spouse at the start of the relationship? Is that
correct?
Why?
Correct.
Later on?
Yeah, either they weren't or either they will. But more and more now, with the premarital questionnaires and a lot of many cases in social media, a lot of this now people are more aware. And so what we're seeing as a marriage celebrant, I'm seeing that a lot of these spouses or potential spouses are actually including now conditions in their marriage contract around these issues.
Okay.
So we're seeing that as well.
That's right. So just as a bit of a backup, huh?
Yeah, they do that as a backup because and they want that safety, that surety, that they're going to be able to continue to work or continue to be close to their family, or they don't want to entertain the idea of being a co-wife.
Yeah, my wife sometimes holds me up to certain things that I do or say, and mashallah, I think she's got a very good memory. But 8 years ago, 9 years ago, so she pulls me up and say, "But remember how you said that?" I'm like, "Yep, you're right." So yeah, we have more verbal contracts with my wife. So
and they're just as binding. A verbal contract it doesn't have to be a written contract. Yeah. You should honor what you tell your spouse. I had a case, a very recent case. I was counseling a couple, and the sister, the wife, she doesn't commit. She doesn't commit to the agreements. And the husband is saying that she'll say yes, and then when I question her about why aren't you committed, she said, "Oh, I only said so. Because I didn't want to have a fight. I didn't want to enter into a fight with you." That's not right. That's not right. And so you need to be committed. And if you, and then so what I had to say to this sister is, well, it sounded as though she just doesn't like confrontation. She doesn't like conflict. So I said to her, well, why don't you then go and get help to learn about how to fight in a very respectful way, in a very dignified way, in a way where you fight without fighting? Why don't you go and learn to exercise that muscle, but instead of lying or just saying yes for the sake of it? So again, what we need to identify about ourselves, and we're talking about ourselves here, is what are the areas in life that we still need to work on? Which muscles are still very weak that we need to master, so that when we are in that situation, we don't allow for the situation to escalate more than it should. And one thing that we have to understand about relationships is that you need to get comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. That's a big part of relationships. Would you agree?
In my marriage experience, yes.
Even in mine, right?
Right.
So we have to sit down and have these uncomfortable conversations, because things pop up that you're not ready for.
That's right.
You were not expecting.
You didn't talk through.
We didn't even know was going to happen. You need to be ready to have those conversations. So therefore, one of the areas that you want to really master when it comes to before the relationship and during the relationship is conflict management resolution. And how can we disagree respectfully? How can we enter into win-win? How can we have time out? How do we avoid rage and so on and so forth? And there's an art, there's a skills, there's tools. So a successful marriage isn't one that is devoid of conflict, but a successful marriage is about couples who have the tools to deal with conflict. And that's something that we really need to master, because you will have difference of opinion. You will have moments, maybe in your family dynamics, there's never really been any reason to get mad at anything, right? It just happens to be that. But maybe this person that you're married to has come from a very different family dynamics, and there's always problems, and everything's a problem.
And now you have to deal with those problems, right?
Yeah, you have to.
I feel often in marriage, we want to avoid that uncomfortable conversation, and in doing so, we actually take our marriage to a cliff.
You're absolutely right.
That's how I feel, because it's difficult, it's confronting, it's hard. But then once you sit down and start talking things through, and you're ready to make certain compromises or find the middle way, then you realize that, hey, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. And this is my experience personally, but just coming back to knowing yourself, Sheikh, like I guess very good points, but often it's a bit hard to analyze yourself and get to know yourself. I think it requires a lot of contemplation and thinking. What would you advise? Like, should we ask a friend to tell us? How should we go about this? Because I find it challenging personally to, what really ticks me off or what makes me happy, perhaps. There's things, but at a deeper level, it's hard to analyze oneself. This is my personal experience.
And that's why it's good to ask the people around you, whether it's a work colleague, whether it's a friend, especially friends, because friends aren't like judgmental. Friends, they just love you for who you are, and they can tell it to you as it is, and you probably won't get as offended from a friend than from a spouse, maybe. But I mean, we're talking about before marriage.
Yeah.
But so I think, reach out to the people around you that you've interacted with, and just ask them, look, I want you to be very blunt with me, very honest with me, very raw with me. And I'm ready. Because I really want to get to know myself better. What have you picked up about me? The good, the bad, and the ugly, and then just then start to monitor yourself in that area. And if you feel like there's a weakness, that yes, you are quite hasty, you have a short fuse, then you're probably going to identify, maybe through a counselor, where is this behavior coming from, and then learning how to be more in control and managing those emotions.
You touched on the counselor. It's a bit of a stigma, perhaps, in our community, and especially if you're not experiencing any mental health issues. I never thought about going and seeing a counselor, to be honest. But I did have a sister. I have a Muslim sister who's a psychologist, and she said that I think people who are married should see psychologists on a regular basis, even though if they might not have any problems. So what's your take on that? Like, do you think it could help to make a marriage thrive, or contribute in the contentment in a marriage?
I would agree. Yeah. I would agree with the sister to a large extent, because like you said, it's not just about being in an ordinary marriage. You want to be in a thriving marriage, and the quality of your marriage, what you have to understand, maybe some people in here or online are not married, but once you're married, the quality of your marriage is going to have an impact on your mental health, on your physical health, on your resilience, just to feel better if you're feeling down. It's going to, like I said, it impacts you internally and externally. We spoke about some of those external factors. So I think any tips, any advice that you can get on marriage is very valuable advice, because you have to understand also that your children are learning from you. And, you can learn things like, for example, I'll give you one quick example. One of the things that we can say is, let's say you've had a fight in front of your children. It doesn't have to be a big fight or a loud fight or a raging fight, but you've had a fight with your spouse in front of the children. So, and then, your children see that, but they never ever see you make up. They never see you maybe say, I'm sorry, or hug again, or whatever it is, right? they're going to think that, okay, you fight, but then how do we, what happens after that? They've never learned how to be. But imagine now you fight in front of your children and you make up in front of your children. You say, look, I'm sorry, come here. I want to hug you. Inshallah, everything's good. I just had a moment. You're teaching your children now that relationships, they can be fighting. But if you, I mean, not that you should be fighting in front of the children, but if it happens, okay, how do you repair? How do you repair? And I think our children need to learn the repair, right? And so the focus should never be on the fight. The focus should be on the repair.
Yeah, very good. And that could perhaps go with extended family as well. The damage, I think what you're trying to get to is whatever the damage you're causing should be repaired in a similar way.
Exactly.
Let's say if it's in an extended family setting that you're causing a damage, perhaps the repair should also be in an extended family setting as well.
Correct.
Right? Like,
because it happened openly.
So yeah, okay, beautiful. Thank you for that. So we've talked about religion. We talked about, I guess, a few other things. But they say you don't get married to the person; you get married to the family, right? So there is the in-laws that comes with the package, other extended family, and there's one or two questions around in-laws and parents and things like that too for tonight. Those pre-questions. But what are some things that you should try to learn about of your potential spouses, parents, or family? Like, what are some of the things that you should watch out for? Because this tends to be a common theme from my understanding. Would you agree in your counseling as well?
Well, not only through the counseling, but I mean, through the research shows that from the top 3 reasons for toxic marriages or contributors towards a toxic marriage or dysfunctional marriage or even divorce is family interference, right? And it's one of and it happens to the best of couples. I just can think top of my head now. I'm remembering a couple who are professionals, who are actually doctors, and just the issues that they were facing and the amount of times they kept on coming back to me just to make sure they're doing the right thing Islamically, that they what should they be intentional about. So what we realize, it's a very, very common problem when it comes to family interference and the in-laws. And you can probably look up any popular sheikh online and type in their name and type in in-laws or family or whatever, you'll see that they've spoken about it because it's very, very common, right? I had a case last week, and the brother and sister urgently needed to talk to me, and there's court cases and there's AVOs and there's, it just got really, really ugly. And so they just got on and they got online with me. And they just went on and they wouldn't even let me say a word. And her dad did this and her mum did this and they just kept on going and going and going. I couldn't fit in any words. But what I do remember at the end of it, all I had to say was 3 words to them when it comes to dealing with the in-laws.
Okay.
And they took those 3 words and it was like, yes. Do you want to know what they were?
Writing down here.
Those 3 words were less is more.
I see.
That's it. The less your family know about your stuff and what you're buying and what you're doing and what decision making is better for your relationship, because they have expectations of how you should live your marriage or what you should do with your money or what you should do with your parenting and how your children need to be fed and how your children need to be. Right? And as soon as you don't meet that narrative, subhanAllah, it's all hell break loose, right? So I think if I had to, that's one advice. I remember I just said that and I remember the brother goes, yes, less is more. And I go, and literally we had a few words and that was it. And they just wanted to talk about the whole problem, right? So boundaries come into place, having healthy boundaries. One of the advice that I like to give in most cases, unless it's absolute necessity, like I'm talking absolute necessity, don't live with parents.
Okay. This is interesting, right? Because we know that some cultures are very strong on this. So what makes you say this here?
What makes me say that is the reference points. I've got heaps and heaps of reference points.
Okay.
And it's, what am I talking about? Let's be a bit more specific.
Yeah, please.
We're talking about the wife living with her in-laws, meaning living with the husband's parents. For some reason, that dynamics just doesn't work. Okay. In most of the cases that I've seen, most of the cases, you see that, subhanAllah, it can be very problematic because, and generally, let's be a little bit more specific as well, the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law, right? And the mother-in-law wants, for this daughter-in-law to treat her baby, right? Because he's always her baby, right? She wants for his daughter-in-law to treat her baby in the way she feeds him, the way she washes his clothes, and then the way she has to be with her. They've already set these in many cultures, they've already set these expectations of how the daughter-in-law should be behaving with the mother-in-law. And the daughter-in-law can come from a completely different culture, or the daughter-in-law never really signed up for that, right? And we're living in the West now, and we think very differently to probably our forefathers and our parents, right? So yeah, it is very problematic. I see, and I see if you can have your independence, I think it will save a lot of problems. And a lot of the time, the husband is caught up in the middle of trying to please his parents and please his wife. That's a very challenging battle.
Poor guy, huh?
It's very hard, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, what's the Islamic position? The Islamic position is justice.
Yeah.
The Islamic position, and subhanAllah, how interesting that verse in the Quran is. كونوا قوامين بالقسط. Be upright in justice. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله, witnesses to Allah, ولو على أنفسكم, be it against yourself, أو الوالدين, or be it against your own parents. You have to be just. Islam teaches us justice, that we have to be just, even if it's against our own parents. We should never ever side with injustice or oppression or tyranny or sin or wrong. We need to call that out.
Even if it's against your parents.
Even if it's against your parents. Yeah. But respectfully.
Yeah.
But using the best possible strategies, whether I'm going to call in a sheikh, I'm going to call in a mediator, whether we're going to call in an uncle, an elder, right? Again, get that advice if you're not sure which way to go about it. Yeah. But we don't want to pour fuel on this fire. We want to try and just manage it. But it's a very, very problematic. It's one of the main issues that comes into counselor's office.
Inshallah. And given that Islam puts such emphasis on parents' rights, especially mothers' rights, it does become very challenging to.
It's different. It's different. It's not about putting your wife first or putting your mum first. That it's different. And I think it's about ensuring the rights of your wife and ensuring the rights of your mother and ensuring the kindness to your mother and kindness to your wife. That's the trick right there. That's where you need to sort of learn the tools on how to balance between the two.
Which is not an easy rope to walk. So
it's not, and this is where you got to be intentional. You got to learn. You got to be diplomatic. You've got to be, seek advice, tools, knowledge.
Yeah, inshallah. Thank you, Sheikh. Now, what about children, Sheikh? Is this something that's important to talk about before marriage? Like, let's say, what's your expectation of a family, children? How many children? Like, are these things too specific to talk about before?
Not
marriage?
At all. Why would they? Then why would they be? Because again, everybody has a different expectations when it comes to children, to the number of children, to the parenting of those children. You want to make sure you're on the same page. You don't want to have these children and then later on, I disagree. I want to do it this way, or I want to do it this way, and then you go your separate ways, and then the children are caught up in them because they're the biggest victims in all of this, right?
I've seen a divorce case where literally the brother wanted more children, but the sister didn't want to, and they ended up divorcing.
Yeah, it happens.
Right. So I guess it could lead to even perhaps a divorce.
It could. I remember once I have a friend, and many years ago, and he said to me, my wife can't have children. I go, okay, and he goes, oh, I'm thinking of divorcing her. And I was thinking, wow, you would divorce her just because she can't have children. But personally, maybe that's something that I wouldn't entertain, right? But you would do that. He goes, yeah. I go, have you thought maybe, do you love her? He goes, yeah. I go, well, maybe she's open to being a co-wife. Why would you divorce her? Maybe she's not. And subhanAllah, everybody's story is going to be, and their expectations is different. But long story short, subhanAllah, with a bit of patience and dua, because sometimes in the first, when you're first trying for children, it can be quite challenging. It doesn't happen very quickly for some people, and especially in this day and age that we're living in, and there's a lot of contributors towards that. But our lifestyle, our diet, maybe our who knows, a host of things. But subhanAllah, he ended up now, I think he's got 5 or 6 children from that same wife. He was about to divorce her. And we said to him, just be patient a bit more, and so again, children, it's interesting with children, because the studies show from the Gottman Institute that if you don't really have a plan regarding children and how you want to manage children and parent children, if you don't have a plan regarding children and they can decrease that connection between you both. Let's call it the emotional connection between you both significantly. I think the figure was somewhere close to 40%, right? I can't remember the figure, but it was really high up there, right? So that now, before both of you were what they call a dyad, that there was just the 2 of yous. Now you become a triad. There's a 3 of you, and it's like this baby it's an intruder. It's intruding into your marriage, because before you can just pick up and go, right? Now everything slows down, and now the attention goes from baby 1 to baby, the actual new baby, the newborn becomes the baby.
Husbands know that really well, so
and it's like, what about me? What happened to me? You were giving me all of this attention. You were going out with me. You were spending time with me, and now all of this attention is just on this baby, and there's no more date night, and there's no more we time. Whatever happened to all of that? So I think, talk about like, hey, when we're going to have the baby, inshallah, we have to be very intentional about our we time moments and our date night, and and have a plan. And you might even need a nanny, or maybe you need a babysitter. Maybe you're going to have to change your strategy once you have that baby, because you'll feel emotionally disconnected if this baby, especially, is very, very demanding. It will just take away from the quality of the marriage.
Yeah. Very, very good. Yeah, thank you for this, Sheikh. I guess maybe one last question before we go on to stretch a break, and then I'll open the floor to question and answers, inshallah. You touched on culture. How important is culture for, I guess, compatibility? Like, do you see that is happening? Like, do you see any issues in that space where different cultures can become an issue for a marriage? So do you think that's something that the spouse should explore before marriage?
I personally don't believe so. And the reason why I say that is for 2 reasons. First of all, as a marriage celebrant, I'm doing a lot of intercultural marriages, right? And I've been doing this for like 23 years, right? And actually I do a lot of, like, most of my clientele will be intercultural, right? And interestingly, I don't recall them coming back to me. That's number 1. Why are they coming back to me? If culture is a problem, why am I not hearing back from them? That's number 1. Number 2, I'm a marriage counselor. So now as a marriage counselor, I'm seeing people in front of me on a daily basis, 3-4 couples a day from around the world, right? So again, you have references, and you think, how come none of these people are ever saying, it's because of his skin color, it's because of his language, it's because of his this cultural thing that they do? I honestly can say I do not recall ever a couple complain to me because of their two different cultures. But what I do say is that we all have an internal culture. And we all have an internal culture, and that culture is our expectations and our values and our personality types and our needs and those expectations. We all have an internal culture, and that's the culture that you want to tap into, not you're from the Desi culture, you're from the Arab culture, right? Okay, or the Turkish culture.
Yeah.
If anything, subhanAllah, you look at the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, he was marrying from different tribes, different cultures, right? We didn't really hear it being a problem, right? When you go to Hajj or you go to Umrah, and you're interacting with so many cultures, you enjoy that. It actually adds value. It enriches your thinking, the way of doing things. So I think it comes back more down to compatibility. It comes back down to when you're looking, I think, for a spouse, while we're just sort of ending off on this note, I think it's very important that you're looking for attraction. And attraction is not like, you're marrying Mr. Mr. Universe or Mrs. Universe or Miss Universe, right? We're talking about you being attracted to the person. Attraction is a very, very important part of marriage, right? You need to be attracted. And why do I say that? Because I have a lot of cases whereby the brother or the sister marry on the basis of deen, right? And only deen, and only, or maybe they marry on the basis of, they have a lot of things maybe in common, right? But they discount the deen, right? So, they discount the attraction, right? So when you discount the attraction, okay, that's going to be very problematic because you can't what's the word, when it comes to chemistry, it's very hard that attraction to manipulate that, right? So attraction has to be there. The deen you have to make sure you're on the same page regarding the deen. You're on the same page regarding your vision and maybe expectations, right? Values, okay? They're the things that you want to be sort of to be focused on, inshallah. I wouldn't be looking at the color of the skin or the language, because if you allow me, if we go back to Surah Al-Rum, and Surah Al-Rum, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that verse that's written on the invitation cards, they always write it, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَّوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً, and placed between you love and mercy. Now, if we go back to that verse, there's a passage there. There's a verse before and a verse after it, right? And in the verse before it, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَكُم مِّن تُرَابٍ, right? Allah is reminding us of our origin, that He created us from dust. ثُمَّ إِذَا أَنْتُمْ بَشَرٌ تَنْتَشِرُونَ. Then He mentions that verse. Then He, in the verse that's following the verse about love or affection and mercy, He says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ. And from His signs, right, is the creation of the heavens and the earth. وَاخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ. And the fact that you have different languages, different tongues, you speak different languages, and you have different color, right? Different color skin. It's all nestled, it's all there. It's a passage all around marriage and affection and mercy. So it's okay to marry a person who's from a different culture, okay? But you just have to make sure the inner culture is connected.
You probably remember, Sheikh, but we actually did my brother's nikah as well. So he's married an Egyptian.
There you go.
Of Turkish background, and they've been together for a number of years, alhamdulillah. So that's another, I guess, case for you to use
alhamdulillah.
In the future.
Alhamdulillah. Look, I got nothing against the Turks because my son-in-law's a Turk.
MashaAllah. Beautiful.
So again, my daughter's Lebanese, and they have a beautiful marriage.
And we are moving towards an Australian Muslim identity as well, like especially second, third generation as Muslims. I feel that we share a very similar culture now here in Australia as Muslims, so that probably could be a good denominator for us too, inshallah.
Inshallah, ya Rabbi.
Okay, so let's take a stretcher break, inshallah. It's 7:58 now. So we'll come back at 8:05, inshallah. So brothers and sisters online as well. So we'll give 7 minutes. If you want to grab a tea or coffee, some biscuits, make sure you stretch so you don't fall asleep. and then we'll bombard Sheikh Bilal with questions, inshallah. All right. Thank you, brothers and sisters. So we'll start the question and answers from Sheikh Bilal, inshallah. Questions from you. And there's a scholar, he says, Sheikh, he says, all questions answers, no questions asked. So we'll try to answer all the questions, inshallah. So Bismillah, let's start. I will let the on-site audience with the first question, inshallah, and then I'll jump to online, and I will keep alternating, inshallah. So, okay. I mean, we prefer to have questions related to the topic, but if you do have other questions as well, it's open. So, is that okay, Sheikh?
Absolutely.
Okay, general questions are fine too.
I'd love to.
No worries, inshallah. All right, let's start. Who's going to take us off with the first question?
The first question is always the hard question.
That's right. Okay. Well, I'll give the on-site a bit of time. I'll ask a question from here, Sheikh, in that case, inshallah. So one question is, what do you recommend at what stage to seek advice from a third person in marital issues, and who should be involved? So at what stage should people seek advice on their marriage, and who should be involved?
I think after the stage that you've actually attempted to work on that issue with your partner, you have to give it a go first. Would you agree? Or would you go straight away to a third party?
You should definitely.
You try with your partner first and get into the habit of having uncomfortable conversations. Get into the habit of discussing the challenges. How else are you going to get good at it, right? So I think start together. Now, let's say what I normally do with a lot of the couples, I say to them, look, put down all the things that are like the pain points in your marriage. Like write a list of all your pain points, each, or your expectations and your pain points. Let's say you got two separate lists. And then start to talk about each item, one item at a time. Don't be all over the place. Get closure before you go on to the next item. Then you can also have a third list, which is the list whereby we just can't see eye to eye regarding this particular point. We can't see eye to eye. So now what we do with that list, we now take it to the person who is an expert in that area. Let's say that issue is related to money and finances. We can take it to a financial advisor or an accountant. If it's to do with the relationship, then we'll take it to the marriage counselor. If it's to do with the religion and what the religion says, we'll take it to the sheikh, and so on and so forth. Okay? So start, creating your list, have a talk, and it's all about really managing that conversation. There was a study of 700 couples who were over the age of 65, and they were married for over 30 years, right? So they wanted to find out how they managed to stay married happily to each other for so long. What the one key standout was, they were able to sit down and discuss like hot topics or difficult situations without things escalating, right? That's the secret. You need to have those conversations.
Escalation. That's something that we should perhaps talk about as well. But,
escalating.
Sheikh, I'm going to ask you a question that I had actually while you were talking earlier on. We talk about getting to know one another. We have all these questions. So what do we do? Do we get print these out, sit down with your potential spouse or even your existing spouse, and start asking them one by one? How would you recommend going about asking these questions to
the questions? So you would highlight what's important to you.
Yep.
You would highlight and say, okay, I've never really asked my partner this. Yep. I really want, I've never thought about this scenario happening. And if it was to happen, what would we do in this situation? So you don't have to ask all the questions. You can just highlight the ones that are important to you.
How would you, in what setting should you just, I guess,
are we talking about pre or after?
Pre-marriage.
Pre-marriage.
And then we'll talk about thing as well, post-marriage too. I mean, post-nikah, that's it, not post-marriage.
Okay, so we're talking about in the courting period?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're in the courting period and you're at the, you're at the parents' home,
yep.
You could, have a discussion Every time you visit, you can just discuss some of the questions that you've highlighted. You talk to each other and say, yeah, what's your perspective? What's your expectation regarding this? What do you say about this scenario?
To be open with the questions and just ask them.
You have to be open. Yeah. Look, don't fake it. One thing I'm going to say to singles who are ready to get committed, don't fake it. Be your authentic self. Be your authentic self. Because I'll tell you why. You can only fake it for so long, and then your true colors will come out. So be your authentic self. And if you're not authentic self, you're going to be attracting somebody. They're going to think that you are like that, but then you're not really like that. And then they're not going to like you because you're not like that. They thought you were that person that that the one that you were showing you are when you're not.
That's right. It's going to come back to bite you.
It's going to come back. So, it's going to come back. Just be honest. Number one, be honest with your responses and put your trust in Allah, even if it means this relationship is not going to work. Even if it means that's it. You're so infatuated with that person, right? But you don't want to lie, because the heartbreak and the disappointment will be much more harder later on when the true colors all come out.
Yeah. Okay. There's a question, Sheikh. Actually, let me come back to the floor. Yep.
There's a variety of approaching the family. Some people use like their aunties, their uncles, and some people might prefer to face the father themselves. Can you talk about the pros and cons of both? Because, like, say, I might prefer to face the father, but the father might be like a strong figure or something, and you might think you're a strong person, then someone, when you look at it, you're like, I think this person has a stronger aura than I do, and that might be like okay, deal with that now.
So just for the online audience, the question is about how should you go about getting to know the girl, right? Should you be approaching the family, the father, or should you be approaching the girl directly? So that's the question from my understanding. Yeah. Okay. All right. He was in the talk, I think, Sheikh. But yeah.
About the approach. How do you approach the family? How do you approach? And we're talking more about the bride, talking about the wali, right? That's what we're talking about here. And every wali is going to be different, right? And I think, yeah, it's about maybe asking the bride or asking this girl, saying, look, how do you think I should approach your father? Should it be through my father contacting your father? Should I contact him? What are his expectations? You want to talk his language. You want to do it, in a way that he's going to feel acknowledged. Maybe he's he wants you to do it. And that's his expectation, even though we might disagree with him, right? It's not about whether we agree with him or disagree with him. It's about getting the best possible outcome, right? So what you would do, you would ask the girl might ask the mum. The mum might say, hey, yeah, look, in our culture, in our tradition, the mother should call me. And then it could be the mother calling the mother. It could be the father calls the father. It could be, no, you have to call my father and say, hey, assalamu alaikum, I'm so-and-so, we're interested in coming to get to know your daughter. When is a good time to visit? So find out through the family themselves, or if you can't find out, you maybe would go to an elder from that culture. Because remember, we're talking about also intercultural. Maybe the Indonesians, they do it very different to the Lebanese. We do it very different from the Malaysians.
Yeah.
So you see, it's not so black and white in this day and age, because there are different cultures. I get fathers calling me up, like let's say for an Indonesian father, he says to me, hey, my son is marrying a Lebanese girl, and they're talking about this whole advance amount for the mahar and the deferred amount for the mahar. They call that the mu'ajjal and the mat'adda mat'akhkhar, or the mu'ajjal and the mu'ajjal. What's all that about? We just give $300. Right? It's like, okay, let me explain to you. All right, we don't do $300 as Lebanese.
Put a few more zeros, right?
You know, I had a marriage the other day, and the mahar was perfume. That was it. Like the mahar was, I'm giving my wife a set of perfume, right? And I just had to double check that, and I had to do it. I go, look, is this the mahar, the perfume? And they go, yeah, okay. Is that everything? Yeah, that's it. Okay, thank you. Because it's not normal, right? I'm not used to that, right? So yeah, you got to check in with the different cultural expectations as well.
Very nice. Yeah, thank you, Sheikh. There's two questions which I think we could merge. Yeah, following I think this conversation. The questions are how do we get to know each other in a halal way, and the other question is also about getting to know someone for marriage. Like, if parents are aware, do you see a problem with meeting in a public place such as a cafe, or do you suggest that another friend or family member still attend, even if the individuals are, let's say, mature and not very young?
So the second part, you might have to recall my memory for the first part, but for the second part of the question regarding seeing each other publicly, I don't endorse that, or I don't agree with that. I would say always meet through the family home, get to know each other through the family unit, exchange visits with family. That way you're never alone, and there's no room also for the shaitan to play his part. So and then the first part was about halal.
Yeah, getting to know each other in a halal way.
Getting to know each other in a halal way, yeah. I guess through the front door. Yeah. Be brave, be courageous, knock on the door and say, hey, I want to get to know, your daughter. And you're not saying that, hey, I'm here to marry her. I'm just saying getting to know your daughter. So you go through that, you go through your questions, you make sure that the deen, the attraction, the expectations, all of those things, you discuss that. So now, then you would officially ask for the hand and say, well, look, I want to be now more committed. Do you guys accept me? The father says yes. We then start talking about a future date of nikah, and you can go from there, inshallah.
Beautiful, inshallah. Yeah, coming back to the floor here, questions. Do we have questions on the floor? Yep.
I guess the four principles of marriage is obviously the hadith of the Prophet. And obviously the deen. Some people just take it, look, you need to just focus on deen and leave, and the rest should come with it. But as you said, they all come as a package.
It is a package.
The most important thing is the deen.
Yes.
But at the same time, you still have to look at other.
Absolutely,
areas.
Because there's other hadiths.
So, I just want to.
Oh, sorry.
The question, just for the online audience, I guess. So the brother here is saying that the hadith on a woman is married for 4 reasons, and
Same.
Yeah, same. And so is this? And then the Prophet says, marry her for her religion. But is this the only thing we should focus on, or what about the other 3? How should we view this hadith? I think that's more or less the question, right?
Yeah. So if the focus should be on so the emphasis is on the deen, but doesn't mean that we disregard the other things such as attraction, because we have hadith whereby the Prophet ﷺ, there was a companion, and he said, the Prophet ﷺ said to him, asked him if he got married, or he said he got married. And then the Prophet ﷺ said to him, did you look at her? And he said, because the women he married one of the women of the Ansar, of the women of Medina, and the women of Medina were known to have small eyes, and to a lot of men that might not be very attractive to have tiny eyes, right? So he said to him, because the women of the Ansar have small eyes. So he goes, go and look at her. He wants him to make sure that he's attracted to her. So that there's an emphasis in that hadith on the attraction. And the hadith that is actually saying that, yes, a woman is married for her beauty, is married for her lineage, is married. So it's not like they're not married, but when you're going to be deciding as well, focus on the deen, focus on the deen if you really want to be successful. And there is another hadith, تَخَيَّرُوا لِنُطَفِقُمْ, choose wisely for your seeds, meaning your offspring. And he spoke about al-wadud, al-walud, marry a woman who has a loving nature. There's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ talks about al-wadud. Al-wadud is a woman who has a very loving nature about her. Al-walud is one who's able to bear children. Okay, so there are different hadiths that can support that it's not just looking at the deen.
Thank you, Sheikh.
Can I just ask?
Yeah.
We talked about attractiveness. Obviously, you can't fall in love with someone on the first go, right? Like, what's the definition of attractiveness when you say attractive?
Good. So the question is, like, you can't really perhaps fall in love with someone right at the start of a relationship when you're getting to know them, especially. So, what the definition of attractiveness that you're highlighting here?
It's somebody that you feel like you're inclined to, like you feel like, yes, I can have I can see myself, or there's a level of attraction that will allow me to be maybe intimate with this person. I'm not turned off. I don't look at that person and I feel, I can't imagine myself being intimate with this person. I have a brother who reaches out to me, and he feels deceived because the sister that he married, she has some blemish around her, on her body somewhere, that's like on her face, on her neck or face or somewhere. And when she in the courting period and getting to know him, she always hid it in one way or another, right? And then after the marriage, he was exposed to that, and he's really turned off, and he's always struggled because of that, right? So again, it's just about being authentic, and I think it's quite from the fitrah that we know whether we're attracted or not to a person, in terms of, can I be intimate with that person? Can I see myself with that person?
I guess
it's the
other way around, whether you can clearly rule out things that might
looking from the opposite
be an issue, for attraction.
Yeah,
I guess that's
that. If you can't see yourself, if you can't see yourself being like intimate with that person, then that means that you're not attracted to that person.
That's right. Okay, so it's coming from the other way.
Yeah.
That's right. Very good. Okay, inshallah. So I'm going to come to one of the online questions, inshallah. So there's a question about, we talked about the in-laws or parents living with them. Someone says that I've seen my parents look after their parents as they age and could no longer be independent. I expect to do the same. What's your advice more in relation to parents who are independent? And furthermore, what if you are blessed to have an independent living area, such as a granny flat or a separate house? And of course, I'm aware of the need to be the mediator if issues arise. So I guess, what if you have your own space, like a granny flat, or somehow you got your own privacy in a way?
It does, having your own space does mitigate, it does reduce the tensions. But from my experience, from speaking to couples, that there is still problems, because there's an expectation that the daughter-in-law comes over more, or she passes by more, or she sends over food, or she does this and she does that. It all goes back to the expectation of the parent. Now, not all in-laws are going to be like that. I mean, but what we've seen in the majority of cases, I mean, I've had exactly that scenario, the granny flat, the house, and it was turmoil. So there have been cases like that, or living upstairs, downstairs, right? We've had those cases as well. But look, there are parents that when they get older, they need to be looked after. Now, again, if they're elderly, then maybe they won't. Let's say try it out. I mean, but if it becomes a problem for any reason, then you're going to have to come in with the siblings and work out a plan that will ensure the best interest of these parents. So I guess it's going to have to be like a case by case scenario sometimes. We're speaking in very general terms, but sometimes you've got to look. Let's say, for example, there's nobody to look after your aging parents except for you. You are the only child. Who takes precedent now? Your parents do. Even if your spouse is going to walk out on you, your parents take the priority because you have more of a duty towards looking after your parents. And the very fact that your wife can't get along with them, that's now becoming a secondary issue. But when there's siblings involved and a plan B and a plan C and D, I think it's a bit of a different scenario.
Yeah,
we have to look at each scenario
case by case.
And
this one they need to come and see individually.
Yeah, and that's why we can brainstorm. We can think about options, and we had that. We had one recently where a very similar scenario, and we said things like, "Well, doesn't that have a sibling? Why don't you share the load? And why don't you do this?" And yeah, there's always going to be some options.
Beautiful. Inshallah. Is there a question on site? Okay, I'm going to go back to online in that case. There's a question about knowing yourself and understanding your triggers / tolerances. And overall negative aspects of oneself. So how would you recommend overcoming and becoming the best version of yourself? Do you have a step-by-step strategy of how we should progress with bettering ourselves after identifying our struggles?
After you identify your struggles, and those struggles could be that you have an issue with your deen, with your health, with your mental health. There's different areas of life. I think to be the best version of yourself, you have to look at every area of life. Number one is your deen. And that, by deen, we mean commitment to your salah on time, right? Keeping away from the haram, right? So doing your 5 pillars, doing your adhkar in the morning and the evening. They're very, very powerful to protect you and your family and your relationship and your wealth and your health, right? The morning, you need to be spending some, 10 to 15 minutes every day after Fajr. Download the app Hisnul Muslim, right? And Fortress of the Muslim, and commit to those adhkar. They are a powerhouse. So, and do the same thing after Asr, right? Then if you can add sunnah, sunnah prayers, because Allah loves it when you draw near to Him through the sunnah, right? And there's a very beautiful hadith, Qudsi hadith, whereby Allah says, I become the hearing with which He hears with, and the seeing or the vision with which He sees with, and the hand with which He strikes with, and the foot with which He walks with, and where he to ask, I'll give him, and where to seek refuge or protection, I'll protect him, right? So get as close as possible to Allah Azza wa Jal. That's number one, right? When it comes to your, and then seek the best of the best speakers, and ask who is the best of the best speakers when it comes to the deen, when it comes to seek the best of the best when it comes to mental health, if you've got mental health issues, okay? And it could be, of course, we always like to go for Muslims, but a lot of the times we might not find Muslims. We might tap into some of the works of the non-Muslims, but as long as we're quite grounded with our Islamic identity and our tawheed and our monotheism and our aqidah, so that's not impaired in any way, shape or form by some of these experts. Being the best version of yourself mentally is very, very important, especially if you've got trauma, because what we've realized, when you don't heal what hurt you, okay, in your childhood years, you're going to bleed all over those that never cut you. That what we often see is that a lot of the problems in the marriage is coming from unresolved trauma, unresolved issues, right? So I think you need to identify, if you want to be the best version of yourself, you need to be able to have the tools to manage your trauma, okay? And a lot of the times from the research that I've done, you don't just eliminate trauma, you don't just cure trauma, you manage trauma. You have the tools to be able to manage those thoughts that are coming to you, and that shaitan will also really come in and give you lots of waswas about, right? And invest it. If it's your physical health, go to the experts regarding your physical health, right? Whichever area in life you're weak in, go and get the help that you need to become the best version of yourself. But being the best version of yourself, I believe, it's a balance between your deen, your mental health, and your physical health, and and your relationships, and understanding interpersonal relationships and human behavior, and how to manage and to have that emotional intelligence, I think, is another very powerful phrase, emotional intelligence in dealing with your own emotions and the emotions of the people around you.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. I'm going back to online again. Please put your hand up if you have a question. Yep. Yes.
The boundaries between the couple.
So what should be the boundaries between the spouses, right? Right? Husband and wife. Okay, yes.
So the boundaries could be, you need to communicate what your expectations are in terms of to be able to set those boundaries. So there could be around dealing with the opposite gender. Okay, what's allowed, what's not allowed. I get couples that talk to me about how the husband has, for example, female workers, and how he'll message them and just work-related stuff, and he puts a smiley face. To the wife, that's a boundary. That you don't do that. So everyone's going to have their insecurities, or everyone's going to have their own beliefs around certain things. So between the couple, you need to communicate to each other, what is it that you're not going to tolerate? What is it that gives you anxiety? So now you can set the boundary and say, okay, I'm not allowed to be alone with a colleague. I'm not allowed to send emojis, or when it comes to expenditure, that if we've got a joint account, the boundary would be that we can spend up to this much without telling each other, but beyond that, I want to know. We have to have that discussion. So whether it's boundaries regarding the opposite gender, boundaries regarding finances, boundaries regarding social gatherings, boundaries regarding in-laws, boundaries regarding siblings, you can keep on going. You need to communicate what bothers you, what will give you that sense of insecurity, or you feel like you've been betrayed. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, which sense are you asking?
Together my words properly. It's more on a husband and wife level of what's been expected as a husband, what's been expected as a wife. Lately, well, I shouldn't say lately, it's always been the case, but it's more on either the man becomes more dominant and puts the boundaries to say, you can do this, you can't do this, and do this, you can't do that, and the woman has to obey. Or it could be vice versa. Like within our deen, within our religion, what's supposed to be the right boundaries for a husband and wife. Within this
Okay.
So
our roles, because the deen, but it.
My son just got married.
Mubarak, inshallah. May Allah bless him. Yes.
So the question is more on roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, this would be more on roles and responsibilities. So if we look at the boundaries, I see what you're saying. And if you look at the role of the husband is to provide that safety and that security for his wife. She needs to feel secure in here, okay? And she needs to feel secure externally, that he's also got her back, that she feels emotionally safe, physically safe, in every area of life, she feels safe, mentally safe from any abuse. He is the protector, right? And he is the provider, and he is to be a gentleman towards her, right? So that's his role. He's the provider. Financially, he needs to provide. Islamically, that's his responsibility, and that's his role. As far as she's concerned, yes, she does need to respect that he is the leader of this home. Every business has a leader, has a boss, Allah has given that qawwam, which is that level of has given that leadership role to the husband. So she needs to respect that leadership role. She needs to be loyal to him. She needs to be having a loving nature. She needs to tap into her feminine nature, the way Allah created her as a female. He comes in as a male. Allah says, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى. The male is not like the female. So we ensure that me as a husband, I'm being as masculine as possible, right? I'm the financier, I'm the caretaker, the provider, ensuring that security, and she's offering that loyalty and that loving nature. She has more of an agreeable nature. He might have a little bit more of a disagreeable nature because he's a male. Females by nature can be a little bit more agreeable. That's not to say that a woman is a doormat, but that's the nature. We're going to go back, tap into the fitrah and go back to the basics. Whatever Allah says is haram in this house. We will always do things that are pleasing to Allah. Our foundation is the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal. We don't want to spoil that relationship with Allah, because if we do that, that might come back and hurt our relationship. And then somewhere, and from there we go. Is that? Yeah. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you, Sheikh. So maybe we'll take one or two more questions. So we've taken it from the floor. I've got two questions here, and maybe we could finish off with that, inshallah.
Yeah, I don't mind.
But so what advice would you give to new marriages that include a blended family, i.e. kids from a previous marriage? What are the key elements to parenting and maintaining the marriage? I guess this is things that we are seeing more often nowadays, as there's more divorces, there's kids from previous marriages, and then they get married again. So
again, it's a case-by-case scenario, because how old are these children? Are they the same gender coming from a different marriage? Because once they get to a certain age, then the male and the females, they are Islamically allowed to get married to each other if they were talking about children from two sets
they're
of.
not mahram to one.
They're not mahram to one another.
Yeah.
So like I said, I don't know what the arrangement, the living arrangements are. Again, what do the boundaries look like? Are they always living with one set with you, or are they? I don't know the dynamics of that.
Let's assume there's young children, Sheikh. Let's say they're under the age of 10. I guess. What advice would you give them?
So they're under the age of 10. You have to still be careful, even under the age of 10. The segregation is very important.
Segregation is a big one.
Segregation would be a big one. That at the end of the day, you need to communicate what the rules are in this family home. You both have to be on the same page. With regards to the rules of this home. We don't do, and the kids need to know what the rules are. The kids need to be know what the boundaries are with regards to the other parent, but the other parent needs to also know what the boundaries are with these with their partner's children. So there's a lot of communication around the expectations and around the boundaries that need to be, I guess, committed to ensure things are running smoothly. You need to communicate, about the finances, and do we just pull everything in and we just treat all our kids the same, or your kids have more needs because the other parent has expectations. It can be quite complicated. I think it is complicated. From what we get these situations, and especially when they have when they're becoming adolescents and teenagers, and they become disrespectful towards the other parent or the ex partner, and what they've told the child about the parent or the other parent. So again, it's quite complicated from what I've experienced, but it all comes down to ensuring that we're all on the same page in this house. We've communicated the expectations, the roles, the boundaries, to avoid and to mitigate a lot of these problems in the future.
Thank you, Sheikh. I guess that needs further discussion.
Yeah,
definitely. Maybe one last question I'll take from online, and then we could wrap up with that. So, what would your advice be when you're the one committed and wanting to make the marriage work, but husband doesn't care? How do you know when it's over, or how to make the decision to walk away?
I mean, the question is, have you tried everything? And sometimes, what a lot of the couples that come in, they'll say, "Oh, we've tried everything." And it's like, "What did you try?" Well, we've spoken about it. We've involved the parents, and my uncle came, and my grandma came. I'm sorry, but with all due respect, maybe your uncle or your parents, they didn't have the right advice, or they don't know much about human behavior, or they don't know what the underlying issue is, or they don't understand that this is a trigger point, or this is trauma, or this is attachment issue, or this is a deen issue, or you need to start. Who have you sought? So you need to make sure before you decide on pulling the plug that you really have spoken to the right people, right? That you've gone and then implemented the knowledge that you were told and that you were guided to. So there's gaining the knowledge, there's implementing the knowledge, there's giving it some time, and then of course there is istikhara. Istishara is seeking the counsel of others, but then there's the istikhara and asking for divine intervention or divine guidance about whether you should call it a day or not. And a lot of the times people have still there's unresolved issues, and you really need to identify those pain points and those unresolved issues and really address these issues. And if the partner continues to not respect the agreement, and it comes back to your tolerance. Can you tolerate? If you can tolerate, are there children involved? Is it something that you can tolerate, and is it tolerable? It may not be a tolerable behavior. If you're in danger, if your mental health is in danger, if you're always depressed, and you've tried everything, then maybe it is time to pull the plug. And divorce is a solution to a problem. Divorce isn't always a problem. It's a solution to a problem. Allah is the legislator. He legislated divorce to help us solve a problem.
A problem that cannot be solved.
They cannot be solved.
Right.
So some problems, they're just unsolvable. Some problems, that's it. There's no willingness. When there's no willingness, or you just don't see eye to eye, or then divorce becomes that solution to this problem, or an option to this problem.
There is a lot of problems, like the research shows, that are actually, they're not fixable in marriage.
69%, according to the Gottman Institute, of problems are unresolvable. So there is the day-to-day problems, which is 31%, and these are problems that can be, we can resolve them, but there's a lot of issues, and they're only around, like I said, the big item, the big ticket items, that what you would need to do, you need to create some boundaries around those specific issues. And what does it look like when it comes to this issue? We agree to disagree. We don't agree on this, but there's a lot of other things in this marriage that we do agree on and that we do get along regarding. And so regarding the issues that we don't get along, these will be the rules. These are the parameters when it comes to this issue and that issue. And we're going to respect that, and that we've agreed to disagree. And that's it. Right? There's no, look, one thing we have to understand is that when it comes to the marriage, we've got two individuals here that come together and they're going to make a relationship, a very unique relationship. So we have Ahmed and Khadija. Ahmed and Khadija, they get married, they form this very unique relationship called AK's relationship, right? Because Ahmed and Khadija are married to each other, they have to understand that being married to each other is somehow going to recreate them on an individual level, because they're going to, because you make the relationship, but the relationship recreates you. It makes you somebody a little bit different to who you used to be, because you're married to this person. You're going to have to, are you going to tell me, Brother Ahmed, that you haven't changed some things in your life because you're married to your wife compared to who you used to be before getting married? Some things. Maybe the way you fold your clothes. Maybe the way, I don't know, maybe the way that you clean your clothes. Maybe your wife doesn't like it that you've had to do it her way now because you're married to her, and it's okay, right? Or maybe she's had to go to this restaurant and that restaurant that she was never have gone to, before marrying you, but because she's married to you now, she goes to these restaurants and not to these restaurants, whatever, it could be anything, right? But you have to understand that with every relationship, there's going to be challenges. It's not a perfect world, right? And you need to understand that if you're not prepared to tolerate some of these differences, it's just going to be very challenging. There will be differences.
I think maybe we could, inshallah, finish on that. So I guess thank you for joining us tonight and sharing your insights, your experiences, your wisdom with us. Inshallah, we'll have Sheikh Bilal next week again, and we'll be talking about the five languages of love.
Inshallah.
If you want to check out his marriage course, Muslim Marriage Celebrant, what was the website again?
Yeah, you can just go to bilaldannoun.com, or you can go to muslimmarriagecourses.com.
Yep.
Yeah.
So and see, I guess it's obviously has a subscription fee, inshallah. But yeah, we're looking forward to continuing our conversation next week, inshallah.
I'm looking forward to it.
And thank you very much for joining us, both on site and online, and hoping to see you all next week, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallah feek. Looking forward to it.
Inshallah.